You're in trouble. Who hasn't done that? If mom says I'm going to be in trouble, I'm going out to do that. So this little girl saw the fighting, the airplanes going in the sky, fascinated, and all of a sudden, bang, next to her. And it sort of unsettled her a little bit. And what was it? Her mom heard it, came up and said, I told you not to, you can imagine what her mom said. But the little girl picked up something. It was a 20-millimeter round from a German aircraft. And a few inches more, she would have been dead, because if anybody knows calibers and size, that would have taken her life. But she held on to that. Survived the scolding. I'm not sure, she never told her son whether she listened to her mother again or went out to see more dog fights. But one day, when the whole family was gathered around after Mom's funeral, they were reading the will, the estate, and they all went around, who's going to have this from Mom, who's going to have that. They said, well, one of the most poignant times of the whole day was, who's going to take the bullet from Mom? Right? So, we can, as humans, rise above and pull a little bit of humor out of a very dark time. And here's the last one. Another girl, family in Holland. They were billeting. What does billeting mean? There were Germans, part of the German occupation, staying in their household. And as the Battle of the Scheldt went on, the whole the offensive, occasionally they would notice the Germans would leave, the soldiers would leave, lots of noise, and then they would come back and be all disappointed. And this went on a few times, but they could hear, and they got the news through the underground that, the Canadians are coming, although they had a very, as you ever heard, Operation Market Garden. Allies had a very unsuccessful operation in Arnhem, which I visited as well, the bridge. A lot of movies about that. So they weren't sure the Allies were going to be successful. So this went back on and forth. And then one day, the fighting was getting really intense. They knew the Allies were like 600 meters from the house. They could hear the tanks, they could hear the fighting. The German soldiers had been gone for 12 hours. And they go, wow, this is really unusual. But then there was exploding shells and everything. They heard action outside, small arms fire, bullets moving. So they all went down into the basement to the little shelter, and they huddled, mom, dad, daughters, and children. As the noise went, the house rocked, windows were smashed by the fire, and all of a sudden they could hear, boots moving around on the main floor. Didn't know what to think. Couldn't quite hear the voices. And then bang, 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 down the stairs they came. They knocked open that basement door, slammed it open with the butt of a rifle, we found out after. Really loud, and they got really terrified. Didn't know what was going on. And all of a sudden, there were these look around the basement, and they go, anybody there? And they go, we didn't recognize it. That's not German. That sounds like English. And all of a sudden, they were still terrified and about to come out, and they opened the door on them. The two soldiers, the Canadian soldiers, opened the door. And they all started crying. Said, you're free. We're Canadian. Do not worry. So that was one of the folks who was living here, who she and her brothers survived that and had direct contact with soldiers from Canada who liberated them. It's pretty amazing. There are other sides to the story too. My wife's Italian, and there were young kids, her parents, during the war. But it affected everybody for all the wrong reasons. Anyway, so that's some flavor today of why we're here and some of the experiences that people have. Alan, you want to come on up and tell us your story, please?
kind of a tough act to follow, actually. Thank you so much. My name is Alan McDougall. I'm just someone from the neighborhood. I know Len from church, and just first and foremost want to thank all of the members of our service members here, and it's obviously a solemn day. Thank you very much. I wanted to tell just a story about just a tradition we have in my family, but I guess I would just start off with sharing the story of my great-grandfather. His name was Bill Bradley. He was from Portage La Prairie, Manitoba. He was born in 1899. And when he was 14 years old, he lied about his age and signed up to go overseas into the 43rd Cameron Division, and was in World War I for approximately 3 years. He fought at the Battle of Passchendaele, and was shot in the leg and fortunately survived. I wouldn't be here today if he didn't. But it always impressed me that, I mean, he would have been 14 years old going overseas, and by the time he was 21, he had started a family. He had a son and a daughter, and his daughter was my grandma Jessie. And his son, his son was Irving Bradley, who was born in 1922 and joined the Royal Canadian Air Force and went overseas and did die in the war. And my grandma's obviously very proud of him, and made this scrapbook when I was a kid that has Irvin's picture and my Uncle Irvin and his statement of service. I also have the Victory Medal from World War I that belonged to my great-grandpa, and the other, I guess, little funny thing that came with that, when you received your Victory Medal, which I guess would have been in around 1919 or 1920, it came with this little book. This is a book. This is a 20-page book, and it explains the Great War to everyone, because I don't think people probably had, you know, great knowledge of what they were going over to do. So once you received your medals, you also got a book explaining kind of the socio-political situation of what was going on, and this gets into all of it, the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the British Empire and the history of the conflict. And I just think it's just such a neat little book. So the story is that every year on Remembrance Day, I have two children. Their ages are 8 and 10, and ever since they were little, on the morning of Remembrance Day, we get out the book, we get out the picture, we talk about Irving, we talk about my great-grandpa Bill, and we get out the medals, and we look at them together, and we read in Flanders Fields, and we say a prayer for all of our service members and for all of the generations past. And you know, I see a lot of young people here today, and I hope that you know, we can all appreciate the sacrifices people in the past made to give us the security we have today. And you know, let's keep telling those stories. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Alan. I just want to acknowledge the service members that are here. Steve Gillespie's in from Brussels. He's stationed over there. This young lady, what's your name? Oh, and where are you from? Are you from Ottawa? Are you from... Okay. All right, you living here? You grew up here? Montreal. Okay, great. See? Young people. That's what we need in the military. And we have TJ Kelly, who I've known for years and has helped me out dramatically. And where did you grow up, TJ?
Military family. I grew up all over Canada.
Okay. Great to have you here for a little while then. Anybody else? was somebody else in the back there. He's a little shy.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Sam. I live over on Golden, lived in the neighborhood for about 35 years. And this is an important year for me because it's a piece of personal military and family history that the story began almost 50 years ago when my uncle, who was in the Sherbrooke Fusilier Regiment, came ashore on D-Day, and his tank regiment made it fairly far inland fairly quickly, but they encountered a very strong German force, and there was a big battle. I hadn't heard of it before, in a small village called Biron. And their regiment by the mid-1970s, by the mid-1970s had not put up a monument, and so they were looking around at how they were going to do this and possibly do it on the cheap. So my uncle, who knew I was a little bit of a sculptor, asked me to take their cap badge and transform that into a larger version so that they could put it onto a monument very much like the one behind us here. I saw grainy pictures of it as it was commemorated in this small town of Biron, and it became a kind of a later life passion to try to get over there. So my wife and I did book a tour of the Normandy area this last June, about a week after D-Day, and then the trick was to try to convince the tour operator to have a small detour on our way from one location to Bayeux, so I could at least see it and touch it with my own eyes and hands. So they pulled up to this very small town, a village actually, called Biron, and it was amazing to see that about 10 days after the D-Day ceremonies, there was still flags, Canadian flags, all around the square of this very small town, and a square called Place des Canadiens, where there was a monument very similar to this one, and they had the pictures of those who had passed away right beside the monument. My uncle was badly injured, but he survived the battle. But it was very heartening to see in that area of Normandy how much they still remember and celebrate the Allies and the Canadians who basically rescued them from the Germans at that time. Anyway, that's about it.
Great. We hear more. It's just one of the facts that I met someone many years ago who trained tankers in World War II. When you entered combat, you had about 2 minutes. That's what they gave a tank crew's life expectancy when you enter combat. Just want to say there are also veterans of Afghanistan as well who are maybe amongst us, who are served with me anyway. So I work in Canadian Joint Operations Command, and it's an Army, Navy, or it's all environments that serve there, and there are many who served in the war. There are still those serving who live with some physical scarring that have worked for me, and I just want to say, hey, we remember everybody at all times whenever they serve for us. This is anything else? I'm sure there's got to be another story in here. Here we go.
Hi everybody, my name is Robert Hawking. I live in the neighborhood with my wife Vivian and our 3 daughters. And the very first library book my father ever allowed me to take out was at the Collingwood Library. It was about the invasion of Dieppe by the Canadian troops. And as I grew up, I always had a profound appreciation for the sacrifice that we made overseas. And so in 1998, I was fortunate enough to travel with a group of 17 World War I veterans in Canada who had, these were the guys that fought at Vimy, they fought at Campo, they liberated Mons, Belgium. And in 2008, my wife took our daughter for 1998 was the 80th anniversary of the end of the First World War. 2008 was the 90th, we went back, And in 2018, we went for the 100th anniversary and spent November 11th at Vimy Ridge with 200 Canadian troops. But that trip in '98 was incredibly moving. Every single day, I spent a week or so with these veterans. So 17 of them, 101 years old. There was a World War II vet who's one of the last 2 surviving Canadian soldiers who received the Victoria Cross. And we traveled all over. And there's 2 stories that stood out. One was sad, one was happy. The sad one was on July 1st, 1916, the Newfoundland Regiment launched a major offensive at Beaumont-Hamel. This area, Beaumont-Hamel, has been given in perpetuity to the people of Newfoundland and Canada. And so on that day, it was a day not like this one. It was chilly, it was rainy, and on that day, 1916, the Newfoundlanders, there were so many dead in the forward trenches that the Newfoundlanders had to start behind the front lines. They shelled the barbed wire in the middle, expecting the Newfoundlanders to go through the barbed wire, but they didn't cut the barbed wire. The Newfoundlanders flew into the barbed wire and were cut down, and there were hundreds of them that were lost. And it was said at the time that everyone in Newfoundland knew it was related to someone who suffered with Beaumont-Hamel, who died with Beaumont-Hamel. On that particular day, in 1998, I was standing outside. The Canadian government sent a little marquee tent, and I was standing just outside. There was a number of young Canadian soldiers there, and I watched this very, very old man. He looked like he was 200 years old coming up the road. He was wearing this tweed jacket. He had a row of medals on himself, and he came up, and he walked up and he tugged in the sleeve of this young Canadian soldier, bent down. He went running in, he grabbed the Padre, who's traveling with the Canadian troops. He took the story, and the Padre called to attention everyone in the room, and he said, this man is a French soldier, he's 102 years old, and he remembers when we were here, and he wanted to walk from his farm to say thank you to all of us for what we've done. I mean, that was a crazy, powerful moment. There were so many on that trip. There's this one that really stood out for me. We were in a hotel, and I remember I was sitting in the bar, and there was a bit of a kerfuffle, and 2 of the soldiers were missing. So one of the World War I soldiers was missing, and so was Smokey Smith, World War II Victoria Cross winner. So they sent this young soldier to check their rooms, and he walked up and he found the 2 of them drunk in the older soldier's room singing war songs to one another. And as the story went, I heard it that night, the young soldier went in and said, gents, everybody's worried about you, you've got to come out, you've got to go. And one of them stood up and shoved the Canadian soldier, the young guy, and he eventually had them both in headlocks, dragged out the hallway. So here's a 101-year-old, here's an 80-year-old, still willing to put up a fight. The last thing I'll say is, if you've never been, it is profound to see the number of Canadian flags that fly on headstones. People remember, and it's incredible how much we sacrifice. So thank you for your service.
Yeah, just to give you, I don't mean to go on too long, but a sense of scale, which you may have read. In World War II, there were 11 million Canadians, 1.1 war uniform. 1 in 10 were out there at one time or another. But then you look at everybody in support that involved, and then you start breaking it down from those of the age group who could serve, and the young men who go out there. Now there are women who served too. There are women who flew in support, flew aircraft from Canada, because we were the Commonwealth Air Training Center for the world. They could fly and train the Commonwealth armies here, Air Forces, without being worried about attack. And then they have to ship the aircraft over to the front lines. And there were a lot of women involved in that ferry command. And you can hear a lot of harrowing stories about that and how hard it was back in the day. They didn't have GPS, didn't have radar on the aircraft. Holy smokes. I can only imagine, but this is where it all comes in. It gets very personal, because if you think of 11 million people, 1.1 million in, the majority are young men. Then you go in the age group, it's almost like 1 in 2. Or else someone was in the munitions factories, in building equipment, in supporting. Because the tail is, if you've ever done any military training, or you work in the industry, or you work in business, you produce something, the trail that goes behind that product, the logistics, is huge. You get the pointy end, and you have everybody behind it. So the majority of Canada was behind that effort, truly. The majority of the world, our free world, was behind every effort that we do right now. So we have another, thank you, sir, please come up.
Hello, my name is Charles. I can talk of a member of my family who was on one of my extended family. Harvard law student died in the channel. Died in the channel in 1942. But I would like to speak to a phrase. We will remember them. And the question is, why do we remember them? We remember them not simply because of the sacrifice they made, but for what that sacrifice was for. It was for a society of freedom and real and equal justice. It was for a society that spread across the world, that came from a heritage, a long heritage, that we all value. That heritage says that we all matter, that we have rights, and that governments have duties to protect those rights. And that is why we value and respect those who we reflect on here. It was mentioned earlier that the military is here as the front line, and we serve them, support them. In fact, they support us. But our society has changed, and the values that they fought for need not be fought for now only on a military field. They need to be fought for here. I'm reminded of a comment at the end of a book written by Alistair McIntyre called After Virtue, in which he describes what happens when the concept of virtue disappears from society. And in his closing words, he refers to the Roman Empire and the end of the Roman Empire. And he says, our system now, our society now, faces a similar peril. Then the Roman Empire was being challenged from without. Now the threat we face is coming at least as much from within. It is led by those who are governing us and who have been governing us for quite some time. So if we go back to look at why we remember them for what they stood for, a society of freedom and real and equal justice, a society where individuals matter, a society where governments serve and protect. And that is why we remember. I thank you all for coming here.
Okay, it's almost 20 to 12. We've been out for a little bit this morning, hearing some fantastic personal stories. Just to note that at 2 o'clock this afternoon, there'll be another ceremony here. There'll be a parade organized by the Legion. If someone you know has missed today, they can come out this afternoon as well. Okay, so this is the last call. We're not at the pub, but this is the last call. Thank you, all of you, for coming out and sharing with each other a moment of remembrance on this November 11th. Maybe I'll see you next year. I have a habit of returning like a good ghost. So take care, everyone. Have a good day. And remember those who serve and those who have served. Thank you.